All right. Hi, everybody. I am here with Erin Sunday. Erin is a student in the graduate certificate in language teaching with technology offered by the University of Colorado Boulder. And today she is going to talk to us about how she is in the process of gamifying her Spanish curriculum. So, Erin, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what you teach and where.
Yeah, hi, I'm Erin Sunday. I teach middle and high school Spanish at Yamhill Carlton High School, which is a really small rural high school south of Portland, Oregon.
Okay. And so, when did you start? When did you learn about gamification, and when did you start thinking about gamifying your courses?
Sure. Well, I've been teaching for 16, 17 years. I would have to count the years, but something like that. And actually, my first job out of college was teaching via distance learning elementary Spanish.
Huh.
And at that time, I learned how to use, well, at the time it was Macromedia Flash, and then it became Adobe Flash.
Mm.
Now it's becoming sort of irrelevant, but I used Macromedia Flash to create these very rudimentary, very simple games to play with my elementary students via distance learning, like a video chat. So something like I would say, touch the red turtle or something in Spanish, and they would go up and touch the red turtle, and then I would click it on my end, and the red turtle would like spin and make some noise, something like that. So from the very beginning of my teaching, I've been using games. It's really a natural fit for me because games are really close to my heart. Some of my fondest memories are playing like card games and board games with family members around the holidays. So then when I became a more traditional high school Spanish teacher in a high school, I mean, this was in the early 2000s, so I used offline games. I used a lot of like a Go Fish and Memory and Guess Who, those kinds of games. And of course, now I've been using a lot of like the Kahoot and the Quizlet Live. GimKit is my students' favorite at the moment. So I've always used games when I've been teaching, and I think that's, I've been going more and more in that direction of like total gamification of my classes. And when I discovered Classcraft, that really felt like the natural next step for me. So I've been piloting Classcraft with my Spanish 2 students.
Okay. So before we get into Classcraft, can you describe a few simple gamification strategies that you've used before? Maybe think of teachers who are not familiar with the concept. What does it look like? What does it mean to gamify a course or a unit?
Sure. Well, I think firstly, you can use gaming strategies without actually turning your class into a game. And some of those strategies are really natural fits with the way we're looking at language teaching right now with proficiency based learning and the actual proficiency levels. And some of those strategies really fit with what's happening in curriculum right now for second language acquisition. So for example, my students each semester complete a listening portfolio, which is 20 listening activities that they're able to complete on their own time during the semester in any order that they want. And part of the portfolio includes 3 extra lives. So if they don't do as well on one of the activities as they would like, I stamp their extra life and I reset the activity so that they can redo it. So that's a way of bringing gaming elements into your class without actually having to create a game or turn your class into a game, but it allows students to do, to practice in a way that's low stakes, where they know if they don't do as well, they can get an extra life and do it again. And that sort of strategy comes straight from games and from gamification. So I think, when you're looking at bringing gaming strategies into your class, don't think you have to start huge, right? You can start with a few elements that work really well with your philosophy for teaching and build from there.
It almost sounds like this is something that the teachers who are currently teaching remotely could do, right?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of ways we have, this huge shift right now to online teaching, whether we like it or not. And there's a lot of ways, I think, right now, given everything that's happening in the world, the two biggest sort of gaming strategies that we can bring to our students right now as we're shifting to online work is one, a spirit of playfulness. I think that that's really important right now. Everybody is stressed out, everybody's really anxious, and that includes our students. So giving them an environment where they can be playful and have fun and maybe forget about all of their anxiety for a little while is really a gift that we can give to our students right now. And I think that the other element of gaming that we can bring to them is really that low stakes, giving them the chance to do things over, to redo things, to try things without it going directly into the grade book and having a big, impact on their grade. Especially as they're learning from home, they don't have the ability to just like raise their hand and ask a question. They're having to figure things out on their own. I think that those two things are really important right now, given everything that our students are going through. And those two things come directly from, very much reflect like what happens when they're playing a video game.
Let's talk about Classcraft. So what is Classcraft?
Classcraft is really kind of a Swiss Army knife in that it does a lot of things. You can use Classcraft to gamify behavior management. So students can earn points or gold pieces in Classcraft for doing things like speaking Spanish or helping a partner, those kinds of things. And they can lose health points because, the teacher giveth and the teacher taketh away. So they can lose health points for doing things like sleeping in class or having disruptive behavior or speaking English during a Spanish conversation activity. So you can use it to really gamify behavior management, but you can also use it to share out activities. So instead of using something with this Spanish 2 unit that I piloted right before the schools closed, I shared out all of the materials for the class for that unit on Classcraft. So you can share links to other activities. You can have students even turn work into Classcraft. So you can use it as like your primary learning management system as well to share and collect work from students. And then students can earn points and complete quests and stuff in Classcraft as they're completing these tasks in Spanish or in the target language.
So you decided to gamify a unit. How did you go about it?
Sure. So a really important element of gamifying a unit or gamifying a class is having like a story or a narrative, a purpose. Why are students completing these tasks? What are they trying to accomplish? So I created this story, and the story was that it's the year 3017 or something like that in the future, and languages are disappearing from the earth, and it's my students' job to save Spanish from extinction. I chose that story because it fits pretty well with the fantasy theme, the fantasy aesthetic in Classcraft. So instead of just going and doing these activities and learning Spanish for their own, reasons, they're saving Spanish from extinction by learning Spanish. And then I included this narrative in all of the tasks. I included like an element of this narrative in all of the tasks that they completed. So instead of retelling a story, like rewriting their own story and telling that story using the sight verbs from the unit, I layered on top of that a story that would fit in, a narrative that would fit in with the quest. So you're all sitting around a campfire. It's the end of the day. You guys are tired. You've been on this quest all day. And you're sitting around a campfire and telling stories to entertain one another as you cook your food. So then that takes students to, students click on the link and get into Flipgrid, where their task is to write their own story using the sight verbs from the unit and retell that story, which is an activity that I would have my students do anyway, but I just layered on top of it the idea of like them being around a campfire with their teammates telling stories to one another. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so it seems like when you're gamifying, you're creating this whole layer over a unit or even over an entire course that ties everything together.
Yes, that's a bit of a challenge. It was a really fun challenge for me. I got inspired one night and wrote out all these different, narratives for how all of my activities could fit into the quest. I was really proud of some of them as well. And actually, something really interesting happened in class when I was presenting this information to students, which is that I had an activity that I wanted them to do that I had forgotten about, and I added it to the quest. I just sort of like added it in there, and students were like, "Wait, you don't have? How does this fit into the story?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I didn't really think about that." And they really pushed back, and they were like, "Well, why are we doing this? Like, how is this part of the quest?" And then they told me, "Well, I think that a big eagle came down and like helped us scale, you know, this wall, and then we found a band of roving musicians." And so they were really like, when I tried to include something in the quest that didn't have that story element, the students called me out on it. So that really reinforced for me that that actually is a very important element of the game, is having that narrative and having that quest, and including that in what the students are completing. So this is what this would normally, the white boxes across the top, above where it says like 30 and 50. That's where student names would go, but I boxed them out for privacy reasons. But this is sort of what Classcraft looks like aesthetically for students. So this woman you see here, this avatar with her pet owl, maybe, that's an actual avatar from one of my students who was playing the game. And Classcraft allows students to, so they first go in and they pick an avatar, and the student picked that woman. But then what they can do is, as they earn experience points and gold pieces, they can buy like different outfits for their avatar, and they can adopt a pet, and then they can, I think they can like buy things for their pet or train their pets to do different things, and that's a really sort of fun and playful element to Classcraft. Is it's just fun, you know, like adopting a pet, and gives the students a way to sort of express their personalities and their values really in the game itself. And you know, teenagers really like to express themselves and express their personalities, and Classcraft gives them that ability to do that inside the game, which is fun. So this is sort of what it looks like, and this is the aesthetic with the fantasy aesthetic there, and the avatar and the pets and things. Yeah, so one component of really good video games is that they have a story. They have a purpose. Why am I driving around trying to collect coins from mushrooms, or whatever? I'm trying to save the princess that was kidnapped, or you know, whatever. They have a great story, and so Classcraft really takes that gaming element to heart and gives you the opportunity to write your own story, and to give your own context and your own purpose to why are students on this quest. So for my story, I chose to say that it was the year like 3022, and languages are disappearing from the earth. And it's my students' job to save Spanish from extinction. So they have to go through the quest and collect clues and watch videos. And in learning Spanish, they're actually saving it from extinction in this sort of post-apocalyptic world, which actually now is a lot more close to heart than I ever meant it to be. But so this is one example of how I've included that story in the game. So this task is really recombining some of the sight verbs from this story and writing their own story, which is a pretty common task that comprehensible input teachers use a lot. So instead of just saying, okay, write your own silly story using the sight verbs from this unit, I said it's nighttime, and your team is tired and has built a campfire to warm your hands and cook dinner, and you're all telling stories around the campfire to entertain one another while you're on this quest. So tell an original story using the vocabulary from this quest. And then when you click on the link, it takes them to a Flipgrid activity where they then do the task of writing their own original story and telling it to their fellow quest members, their team members. Yeah. Okay. So you were asking earlier about gamifying things like the speaking tasks that we do in class. This is how you do that. So as I'm going around, I, as the game master, as the teacher, can add points to students' accounts in real time as students are completing activities. So I came up with all of these. I populated the experience points here with what I in my class wanted students to earn experience points for. So things like speaking Spanish, helping out a classmate, completing a partner or group activity with integrity. I use a lot of Kagan strategies. So with integrity means, you know, using that Kagan protocol correctly, those kinds of things. It does come pre-populated with ways that students can earn experience points, but you'll probably want to customize that to meet your specific needs for your class context. And then if you go up to the red circle there, that's the health points.
Are experience points connected to a grade?
Yeah, good question. I chose not to have experience points connected to a grade because I really wanted the game to be low stakes and fun. And I didn't want to add that element of this is for a grade to the game. You could connect it to the grade. I found that it wasn't necessary. I didn't need to tell students it was for a grade to get them to buy in. They bought in and they did these things without having to connect it to a grade. And also my school uses standards-based grading, proficiency-based grading. So it makes it hard to connect some of these sort of behaviors to a grade in class. I do have, you know, like a homework section that counts for 10% of their grade where I could use the experience points. But I personally didn't, and I in my context don't see any reason to, because students are motivated to do this without having to give them a grade for it.
Going to the health points.
So this is how I chose that students could lose health points. So if they were doing these kinds of things, speaking English during a guided conversation activity, for example, inappropriate or off-task technology, that's a big one. I can ding students in Classcraft for like using their cell phone to text their friends. Sleeping in class, I have a couple of sleepers, so that's for those kids that stay up all night playing video games and then fall asleep in Spanish class. And again, this came pre-populated with some reasons that the designers of Classcraft thought you might want to, you know, ding students on their health points. But I customized all of this for my context. The difference between experience points and gold pieces are that experience points, and when you first start using Classcraft, it doesn't matter that you really understand the difference. You'll just be like giving points and students will be getting in-game rewards and you'll be like, oh, that's cool. I'm not sure how you got that, but then you'll sort it out as you go. So it's not really important to understand all these distinctions to begin with to get started. But pieces are what students can use to like buy new costumes or to adopt their pet in Classcraft. And so students are really motivated to get gold pieces because that's like really fun, is, you know, adopting a pet and training a pet and stuff. So I chose to use gold pieces as a way to really differentiate instruction and encourage students to go above and beyond. So what I have used gold pieces for are the things that I would kind of maybe give extra credit for in a different kind of class setting. So if a student completes all of the activities in the quest, I had a few students that were so motivated by Classcraft that they went home like the night I rolled it out to students and did everything, like a 3-week unit. They just did that night and then came in the next day already on level 2 and already with all of these activities done. And I was like, oh, shoot, what do I do with you now? You've literally done everything and there's still like 2 weeks and 4 days left in this unit. So that's when I really started thinking about the gold pieces and how to encourage those students that are really high flyers to do even more. So these are things that are not part of the quest itself, but are extra credit sort of activities or extension activities that students can do, which is a great way to differentiate instruction for those students that are really motivated to complete work in Spanish.
Excellent.
So the gold pieces students are able to use to get new costumes and adopt their pet and that kind of thing. The experience points that students earn, the XP, they get rewards, and some of those rewards are in-game rewards. And some of them are like real World Rewards. And again, Classcraft comes populated with some Real World Rewards, but I found that those rewards were not necessarily, that didn't make sense in my context. And so I went in and customized all of the Real World Rewards. And this is where I really got a lot of feedback from my students as to like what kind of real world rewards would be motivating for them in Spanish class. And they were so creative and had such good ideas. Like these all came from my students because I was drawing a blank and they basically told me all of these. So for example, the battle music, the warrior chooses one school appropriate song in Spanish, and then I play that song at the beginning of independent work time. That's a really popular one because students I do like a music bracket competition in class. And so students get really into like what are some of their favorite songs. I have a class, for example, that will not stop listening to Suavemente. It's like that song is way overplayed now, and I can't get it out of my head. So that's a really popular one where they're like, oh, I have my battle music, I want to play Suavemente, or I want to play, you know, whatever their favorite song is in Spanish. Another one, for example, the jailbreak, the warrior may rescue one device from phone jail. So if a student is using their phone inappropriately, I put it in phone jail, which is just like one of those shoe organizer trees. And I just put it there and I have it hung in my classroom so they can rescue one device from phone jail if one of their teammates' phones gets put into phone jail. So those are just two examples of ways that you can customize the rewards to really meet your context and to meet your needs in your class. And I really like the idea, you know, moving forward of it's pretty easy to customize these. Once you figure out what you want to do, it's pretty easy to customize these. So you could even have each, you know, period that you're teaching choose which rewards they want at the beginning of the semester, so that you're always having that feeling of collaboration with your students and letting them feel like they have some input into how the game looks and works for them.
That's fun. So I couldn't get this one to load, but I think we get the idea.
Yeah, that's okay. This is what the quest looks like for students. Well, it's the top half of what the quest looks like for students. So you can see each of the green circles represents an activity that students are able to complete. And if a student clicks into one of those green circles, what it looks like is they see the story, like I showed before with the campfire story, and I've created stories for all of these different activities so that it ties into the game narrative. And then a link to the activity that they need to complete. Or, you know, and some of these are offline as well, like the reading A-B there, that's an offline activity where students do a Kagan protocol and do some reading comprehension activities. They can, you know, do offline work and also get in-game points as well. So students are able to click on the activity and open up the story, access the link to the activity if it's an online activity, if it's like an ed puzzle or a Flipgrid or something like that. Complete the activity and then earn points in the game for completing the activity. I have these organized as spokes. So you see it says Story Road, and then all of the activities are coming out like spokes from Story Road. You could also have it organized in a path. So students can't access the next activity until they complete the first. So they complete one activity and then the next one is opened up for them. If you were worried about scaffolding things and you really wanted to make sure students did things in a particular order.
Okay, great. So do you get any pushback from some students?
Good question. Yeah, the student reaction for the most part pretty positive. I would say like the majority of students are like, oh yeah, this is fun, I like this. Some students were like super into it, right, and went home and completed everything for the entire unit in one night. And then there were actually you know, a few students that they felt that it was complicated, the aesthetic didn't really appeal to them with the fantasy elements, and they would have preferred just to get the work straightforward and not deal with like the XP and the HP, and it just felt complicated. Mm-hmm. I will say though that those students have come around a little bit as well, and in fact I received an email from a student who was initially a very vocal opponent to Classcraft. The student is not shy about sharing her opinions ever, and she vocally did not like Classcraft and I was like, well, let's just, stick it out and try and get used to it and see what we think. And then she sent me an email and said, hey, I know everything's weird with, the quarantine, but are you going to put another quest up on Classcraft? Because I actually kind of got used to it and now I really like it. And I just need a few more, gold pieces to like buy something that I want to buy in the game. So those students have started to come around. I really wanted to, work out the kinks from my end, do a couple of units with my students, and then do some more formal feedback from my students with a survey, something like that, and maybe even a focus group. And obviously those plans have been hijacked at this point by the, school cancellations and stuff. So everything that I know right now is just sort of like informal feedback from students based on one unit that wasn't perfect because I was still getting used to using Classcraft myself. But I hope to continue to use Classcraft with my students and then get some more formal feedback from them as well.
Any pushback from the parents?
No, not at all. I think for one thing, I've been at this small school for a decade now, and so I have a really good relationship with the community. I've taught a lot of like my students' older siblings, that kind of thing. And I think that earns me some goodwill. So when I try new things, I already have the reputation of being a good teacher. So parents and administrators are willing to like give me some leeway to try some things, even if they're like, oh, I don't know what Miss Sunday is doing, but I think we'll trust her for now. I think that that's definitely a possibility, and one of the drawbacks to using Classcraft or just gamification in general is that administrators or parents might think that it's not serious enough or that it's not rigorous enough. I don't agree with that. I think that all depends on how we use it, and we can use it in a way that is really rigorous and provides a lot of really great instruction. So I don't think that has to be true with gamification, but when it comes down to it, we all answer to like our administrators and our community. So that is a potential drawback to Classcraft. I also read on, discussion boards in Reddit or on Classcraft itself, there are some teachers who get pushed back from parents because of the inclusion of a mage character, like a witch character, or sorcerer, I guess, in the game. And for some parents that are very conservative, that is not a good fit and can potentially create some issues.
Okay. So I did look at Classcraft a little bit, and it looked a little complicated. Would you say that it's challenging to learn it? What has been your experience with, learning to use it?
Yeah, good question. It is, because it does so much more than, when we think about using games in a Spanish class, often we think about things like Kahoot or Quizlet Live or Gimkit. And those are really pretty simple games that do one thing. So the interface is pretty intuitive and pretty easy to learn. Classcraft does so much more. So initially, the interface is a bit intimidating. Even, I've been working with online learning for quite a while now and playing around with it. And even when I first entered Classcraft, I was like, oh, this is not as intuitive as I had hoped it would be. Once you get the hang of it, though, once you figure everything out, it really is you figure it out and it becomes easy to use and easy to create quests and share activities and that kind of thing. But at the onset, yeah, it's a bit more complicated to learn. And a lot of that is because so much is customizable. You can choose what students are earning experience points for, choose what they're going to lose health points for. You can customize the rewards that students are learning or are earning for, earning those experience points and stuff. So you have to get in and do that initially, like customize, think through all of that and customize all of that. And so at the beginning, it does take a lot of time to figure out how you're going to use Classcraft in your particular context, and then figure out how to customize all of those things. I would say that it's worth it, though. It's such a great way to, once you get it figured out, an easy way to gamify everything that happens in your class. So it's worth it, but it does take some time at the beginning to figure out.
So when you gamify your classes and you come up with the systems of games and points and badges, and do your students provide input, or do they give you feedback? Is it a collaborative process at all?
Yeah, I always try to, so a little bit about my context. I'm the only Spanish teacher in the district. I'm the only foreign language teacher in the district. So I have my students, you know, for 4, sometimes 5 or 6 years if they start in middle school. And not only that, but I also have like their siblings. So I have been working with some families for like a decade. So that does create a sort of, you know, a more deeper relationship with my students and with their families. And so I think for that reason, and because I work with them over the long term, it becomes really easy to have a more collaborative relationship with them. Like I can say, hey, you remember what we did 3 years ago in Spanish 1? Should I bring that back? Did that help you? Should I not have stopped doing that? Like those kinds of things. So I always try to make my classes very collaborative, whether that's the gaming or you know, non-gaming elements of the class. Ask students for their feedback, sometimes informally, just like, what do you think of this activity? And sometimes more formally with like a survey monkey, something like that. So specifically with gaming, yes. For example, I have been playing around with like the concept of a digital escape room, an online escape room. And after I did that the first time with my students, I did a survey with them asking for their feedback. And actually students have really great insight into what they're doing, and they give really good feedback. I have definitely become a much better teacher by asking my students what they think and taking their feedback to heart. And then specifically with Classcraft, one of the elements of Classcraft is that there's real-world rewards associated with the game. So if students earn enough experience points, they can get some like classroom rewards. Classcraft comes pre-populated with some rewards, things like using notes on a test or getting to sit wherever you want or eating a snack in class, those kinds of things. But those aren't necessarily really relevant to my context. Like I let students eat in class anyway if they're hungry, so that's not really a reward, for example. So I really worked collaboratively with students to come up with rewards that would be motivating to them and would fit better with our class context. And in fact, the students came up with most of them. I was at a loss. I was like, I have no idea what to do. And then they had all these great ideas for rewards. So yes, so I collaborate with students a lot.
So if you decide to use Classcraft, do you need to use another learning management system? Or does it have a grade book? Does it have everything you need?
Good question. It doesn't have a grade book. It does interface with Google Classroom, which is something that I did not use when I piloted it, but I am playing around with it now, and I would like to figure out that interface and make the two work together. So you don't need to use it with another learning management system, but you can, like if your school uses Google Classroom, you can as well. It doesn't have a built-in grade book, so that's something that it does not do. And it doesn't have a lot of the features of, say, like Canvas, where you can host, you know, conversations. You can like a teacher can ask a question and you can answer questions, that kind of thing. It's really just a place to like share links to other activities, but it doesn't have that, you know, some of those capabilities. So you're really going to need to, if you want to use Classcraft as your primary learning management system, you'll have to app smash, right? You'll have to rely on some other outside sources to do those kinds of things. I use a lot of, so I use a lot of like Edpuzzle and Flipgrid to host things like, you know, listening comprehension and have video conversations and that kind of thing. So you'll have to rely on some outside apps as well.
My last question is, when we all go back to school, what are your plans?
Yeah, you know, I had intended, and even before we go back to school, I had intended to use Classcraft, at least try it, as the primary learning management system in all of my classes. You know, I piloted it with my Spanish 2s, and I wanted to roll it out with my Spanish 1s and my more advanced students as well. And I even, because it's a small school, students in those other classes, like Spanish 1 and Spanish 3 and Spanish 4, were saying things like, hey, why does Spanish 2 get to do Classcraft? Why aren't we doing it? I want to adopt a pet. And were kind of annoyed with me that I piloted it with my Spanish 2s and didn't give them the opportunity to do that. And because of that, I might even try to roll it out while we're all doing distance learning. I introduced it to those classes before all of this happened. I showed them the characters and how the game works a little bit. So I might be able to roll it out even now with distance learning. But certainly if that ends up going sideways, which, you know, it might, certainly when we come back, my idea is to really use Classcraft extensively in all of my classes. It's been a lot of fun, and it really makes like the organizational element easier for me in that I can give speaking points, I can take away health points, I can do all of that in one platform, which I really like from just a management standpoint as a teacher.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Erin, and good luck with everything going forward.
Thank you, you too.